All right. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where it is you are joining us today. So, welcome to Commercial Obsession second edition as we talk all things commercial strategy. And today we have the wonderful Jenna Fishel from First Hospitality joining us. We're going to dive into some commercial strategy discussions, topics du jour. But first, just a couple of housekeeping notes. We're going to have conversation for about 20 minutes. We'll see how it goes. And then the last 10 minutes we'd like to spend going through any questions you may have. So feel free to go ahead and drop those into the chat box. We'd love to have your insights and what your questions are for your topics du jour on all things commercial strategy. So Jenna, if you could kick us off and give us a little background, talk to us about how you got into commercial strategy, all that good stuff.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. It's a pleasure to spend some time talking about commercial strategy. It's very exciting. So I am the Senior Vice President of Commercial Strategy at First Hospitality. We manage more than 70 properties across the U.S. with all the major premium brands. And I have been with First Hospitality for 20 years this year. So something I'm very proud of. I was previously a general manager, so I have the operations background, but I really followed my love into revenue management and now have the privilege of overseeing our marketing, sales, and revenue management teams at First Hospitality.
That's awesome. So you are also a first generation commercial strategy professional at First, correct?
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited the way that we're currently structured right now, and I know each company does it a little bit differently. Some with marketing particularly, sometimes marketing will fall under the sales umbrella. And then I see other companies where marketing responsibilities are really falling under, let's call it the digital or e-commerce team with revenue management. And, here at First Hospitality, we really recognize and value experts in all three disciplines. So we have, a sales vertical, marketing vertical, and revenue management. So it's been exciting to, really build out marketing as its own standalone discipline, as it has a huge impact on what we do.
That's awesome. And it's been so interesting having these conversations with people where the commercial strategy profession or discipline is like the hot topic, but everyone's a first generation right now. So everyone's kind of like a trailblazer in paving out what that looks like in their own space and in their organization. And it's interesting. There are certain things that are very similar across the board, and then there's some that are just unique to each individual organization. So your background was more on the revenue management side. That's the other piece I see a lot, is that there's sometimes like a discipline that was really the primary that moved into, I feel like revenue management happens a lot. So can you unpack a little bit about that transition from revenue management into commercial, getting into those other disciplines, into sales and marketing? What does that look like? So I do hear a lot of revenue managers talking in that commercial sense, right? So what's the difference between a revenue manager talking in that commercial sense and actually getting into and strategizing commercially?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for asking. And I think that one of the things that drew me to revenue management is that it has an impact on every, commercial department. I don't think I quite realized it all the time at the time, but that's why I loved it, because I could say, hey, front office, let's pull you in. This is how you can have an impact, like sales, marketing, have a seat at the table together. And this is how we are really going to make a difference. So if, for those that work with me all the time, they probably heard me tell the story. We all know about the revenue management evolution, right? So if we go back 15, 20 years ago, very few revenue managers, they were probably focused on yield management. And, fast forward to today, where revenue managers are this, powerhouse. And I think that they will continue to do that and put on more of a commercial hat. There's still so much more opportunity. I would really love to see, at some point us meeting, revenue managers, if we put that hat on out of the comfort zone and saying, hey, how can we play a role in helping sales with staffing? Like, what does the data show us far as how much group is at our property, what's the potential in the comp set, and does our staffing model, match that? So I don't think that we're there yet, looking at revenue management specifically, but there's still so much more room to grow. And then as revenue management has come along their journey, here comes marketing. So, I think, again, historically, it's fallen under different umbrellas, and now we start to see more experts in this area, and it is also becoming a powerhouse. So I think that companies need to continue to invest in this area. And then, taking a step back and saying, commercially, how does this all work? Where do we need to best invest? And as any enterprise leader does, we have to ask, how are we best deploying our resources? Do we need more support? Meaning, do I need another revenue manager? Do I need to add a marketing manager? Or is it that I need to spend differently to really move the needle, where we see gaps at our property?
That's great. As you're talking, I'm thinking of that kind of that evolution and how it is that everybody kind of intertwines, because you're really looking at three very different disciplines that historically have had very different personalities, right? Revenue management, sales, marketing, it's like the odd trouble. They don't mix historically. And the one piece that we can see consistent across all three of those is that need for good, clean data. And I love that you just pointed out the part of revenue management has data that could be so useful for sales. And I know that when I was hotel side, there was, and this was a little while ago, so I know that revenue managers and salespeople have kind of evolved their relationship, but there was always such a battle between those two offices. And I'd like to say that part of it is kind of the evolution of the personality of the revenue manager. We used to they would lock us in the basement with our spreadsheets, and that's all that we needed to do. But now they actually want us to have personality skills and communication skills and things like that. How are you finding that impacting that implementation of commercial strategy?
So thank you for asking. It's so important, and it's worth spending a little bit of time on, because the profile of the revenue manager has changed. So one of the things that I really look for the most is persuasive skills in revenue managers, because you may be amazing at finding the data and digging and coming up with a solution, but if you can't get the buy-off from the teams, then you're going to find it very difficult to find an impact. So persuasiveness and that personality and ability to bond and connect and relate with the team members is essential.
That's like a salesperson. So that's really interesting, that needing to have some of those sales qualities in a revenue manager for success. But it makes sense. It makes absolute sense in being able to do that. And I do like you'd mentioned finding those pieces of data that can be shared with sales. And of course, there's plenty that we can do with marketing as well. I wonder sometimes if it's such when we look at what the KPIs are for these three different disciplines, and all of the individuals within their disciplines are hyper-focused on meeting their KPIs. And whether they intersect or never touch or are in complete contradiction to the other department's KPIs doesn't really matter sometimes, unfortunately. So everyone's kind of really, really headstrong. And I think that's kind of on us, on the commercial leaders, to fix that, right? So that we can really give everybody the same target to be going towards. As you're saying that too, I just see so much opportunity for data to be shared. And if we had marketing sharing more data with both sales and with revenue and all that, but I almost feel like they don't know what to share that would actually be helpful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned KPIs, and that's something we're always focused on and evolving here. And I think it's important that everyone has these universal KPIs that all three commercial departments are working on. And every company, may have their own, metrics, whether it's, performance to budget or RevPAR index, right? So you're all working on those unified KPIs. But then how does each discipline have their little piece of the puzzle? For example, does sales look at group share? Does marketing look at brand.com share? Just so they own their little piece of the puzzle and they can have wins. So it's a little bit of both, right? You have to look at your contribution and be able to tell those successes, but you all have to be working towards this, greater success as a team. And I think that's where the tug and pull comes in a little bit, which is somewhat healthy, right? So you want different opinions. You want different team members bringing in different pieces of the data, not just revenue managers, but sales. Like, hey, what numbers are you looking at that are going to help me make a more important revenue management decision? Hey, marketing, like if you have a great pulse on our competitive online landscape, bring it to the table, help the revenue managers, make better decisions. So everyone can have their piece of the puzzle while still contributing to the overall RevPAR index. And there's going to be times where there's sales versus revenue management or revenue management versus marketing. And that's okay. I think it's important to own your piece, acknowledge when there's a gap, know what the data says so that you can make an impact in that area moving forward.
How do you, in that commercial space, in that leadership umbrella space, like what does that look like to bring those three different yet overlapping disciplines together? Is it a weekly call? Is it offices in the same room? What does that look like with you and your team? And how has it evolved? I guess it could have started one way and evolved into a different.
Yeah, well, definitely, where we're at current day is each department, all three departments, have a standing call with their departments weekly so they can sort through priorities, challenges, like, hey, here's what you need to focus on. And then every other week, our department leaders, so smaller group of all three disciplines, get together and, we have various topics. And, sometimes we need to be on the same page with these challenge properties so that when we go out to our teams, we're sending a unified message, or here's, the key focus areas, or here's where we need your help. Like revenue may need sales help and sales may need revenue or marketing's help. So it's important that there's, granular focus and big picture at the same time.
That's so great. And I love that there's the united front. You don't separate mom and dad. We're going to be united when we're in front of the kids, but when we're, behind the curtain, we may have to work out our differences a little bit. But that's such, I think, a very healthy way to go about things with the team, is showing that unified front. And it really, I think, fosters that same mentality to those that are growing up in the industry, or those that might be newer in the org, like in setting that kind of expectation of this is how we work together. So, I'm imagining that's not how you started off, or is that how you started off and you just hit it right on the mark from the beginning?
I'm trying to think back to like 10 years ago, right? So what did the team look like? We had maybe 2 marketing people compared to 8 now. You had a revenue management, maybe we had 5 and now we have 20. So much smaller team. We did meet more collectively as a group. However, as the teams evolve and the disciplines evolve, you're able to focus on more, accomplish more. So each team, has their time, to make sure that they're still experts in that area. However, we've recognized the need moving forward to also meet together again as the department leaders. So when you're smaller, it is easier to collaborate more frequently together if things get lost less in translation.
Sure, that makes sense. And what about the difference between independents versus flags? Does the commercial initiative look different in those two landscapes?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the areas that's probably the biggest differentiator for us is the marketing teams and what is their role in the independent hotels. So that is a key differentiator for us in an area we've really invested a lot in marketing. We have specialty positions, in-house, creative designers, food and beverage marketing managers to really help us focus on some of these independent hotels.
That's really cool. So now, so as these three were being pulled together, as we're moving those KPIs, how are we mixing that data? What is that? Is that just a ton of spreadsheets? Are you, is it really just everyone coming in with their highlights? And how are you able to help each discipline identify what data they're holding that would be useful for the others? Because that's, I think, what I hear a lot of times is they just don't know that this would be useful data for one of the others.
Great question. So at First Hospitality, we have a data ninja, I call him, and he supports all of the commercial disciplines at First Hospitality. So that really helps us stay, a step ahead of our competition by really having, this dedicated resource. So we have this data at our fingertips, right? With having this resource and the way we're set up. So our teams aren't spending all this time collecting this data, pulling off one-off reports that may look different from one discipline to the next or one property to the next. So we have the data ahead of time before we meet, as an example, and that allows the team members to come to the meeting and explain why. Like, tell me the why behind the numbers. Don't just tell me the numbers. Like, we have those, but now how did we get here? And then what's the plan, to improve it moving forward? So they have to come with purpose and a plan to make an impact.
What I love about that is, we talked earlier about how the revenue manager has kind of morphed into this sales mind collaboration, able to debate and defend and persuade. And so that's been kind of the evolution of the salesperson. But what I heard you just say is there's also been an evolution really in the other disciplines too, because that idea of turning numbers into stories, that historically, that was the revenue manager's job. We were able to look at those numbers and create the story around it. And a lot of times there was the idea that the marketer, and maybe it's just because this was a little bit more of a pre-digital or, before a real digital boom, but the marketer was really good at talking about the effect of different colors of blue on the consumer and telling the brand story, and right, that very creative brain. And what I'm hearing from you is that they need to be analytical as well. They have to be able to dive into those. So, can you jump into that a little bit, that personality change and that evolution of the marketer and the salesperson too?
Thank you. That's something I feel very passionately about. I think there is maybe this, misconception, marketing, like, oh, they're creative, they're going to be amazing. Well, that's great. That's one piece too. But then where is their eye for detail? So, this is important because sometimes I see now in marketing, there's a lot of repetition, right? Especially on the e-commerce side. If you fix this at one hotel, you may now have to go fix it at 15 other hotels, or you may have to remind yourself to go fix this every month or quarterly, just depending on the situation. So it's not just being creative, but it's a little bit of the analytical or detailed skill set to be able to accomplish all of those things every month.
That's really cool. We're getting close to kind of our wrap up time as far as our talking back and forth. So just a reminder, if you have any questions for Jenna, you have any topics that you want us to dive into, please go ahead and just jot a note into the comments, but we can keep talking either way. So just wanted to remind everyone real quickly about that. So how about sales then? So we've talked about evolution in marketing. We've talked about evolution in revenue management. What are you seeing? How does the salesperson become a more collaborative aspect in the commercial space?
Sure. Back to the data, a little bit. So I want to make sure to emphasize the value of sales, especially as all the other disciplines have evolved and the way things are set up, and revenue managers are more offsite than onsite, than they were historically. So it is so important that, our sales leaders have this amazing relationship, especially, with the local contacts. So I want to make sure to, commend them and recognize, the importance of that, because they play a huge role more than ever before. And I think it's really important that they continue to have a pulse on the data. Don't just rely on revenue managers, but do you know your numbers? Don't let revenue management, steamroll over you and say, we don't need this, or we're going to take this group or not take this group. Like, come with some numbers, come prepared, challenge them, because at the end of the day, you're all going to come to a stronger conclusion, if there is a little bit of that, tug and pull to get to a stronger conclusion, than 5 or 10 years ago. And we didn't touch on AI. We could spend like another 20 minutes or 2 hours on that. But each discipline, and I think of sales first, because it's so easy. Just go in there, to your preferred app. I won't endorse, any app specifically, but use it for prospecting. Like, hey, what is this hotel doing? What hotels are the best recommended hotels in my market? What hotels have the most meeting space? Like, use it for your sales and marketing plan. There's so much that sales can do to continue to be immersed in the technology data piece, like keep yourself technology immersed.
That's, I think, such an important thing. And I feel like that's going to be an instrumental aspect of this progression of commercial strategy is technology. And, we have commercial leaders that are coming in and helping kind of break down those walls, break down the silos, right? That's what we always hear people talking about. And it really takes that leader who understands those 3 disciplines, those 3 different personalities, how to communicate with all 3 to encourage them to come in together. And we're going to need the same with technology. It's going to have to happen where those pieces start overlapping and are sharing and are identifying those pieces. I think that's going to be just, I'm excited for the next couple of years because things are going so fast. Maybe a couple of years might be too long. We'll see it sooner than that. But so in the very beginning, we talked about first generation commercial strategists. You've talked about kind of that beginning and that evolution and your team and what that structure looks like. For organizations that are out there that perhaps don't have a designated commercial leader, that currently are working with those 3 different disciplines, what I like in everything that you mentioned is that there are things that each discipline can do to put themselves in a commercial mindset. So if that organization doesn't have a commercial leader right now, that's okay. You can still operate commercially. I think that's such an important point to drive home. But also, we really want to see this continued development of that commercial strategist. So to anyone who might be looking at wanting to move into that space, helping their organization move into that space, any thoughts as far as what that looks like, what it looks like for you, or what you've seen it look like in other organizations as you've been involved in that discipline?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up. I do a lot of interviews in my position, just for different areas. And one thing that people openly share with me is that their company may not have a commercial leader, right? So it's just separate disciplines. And one of the reasons that attracts them to us is because we do have a position, like myself, so that they feel they have an equal voice, their department, compared to operations, and it's not an operations, driven strategy. So I share that because that was interesting, to hear from me, from outside companies. And then second, regardless of what discipline you're in, I always say the best leader should lead. Don't feel like if you have a voice, speak up. It doesn't matter if you're, in sales, marketing, or revenue management. But if you can lead, and there's leadership needed, which is in many cases, speak up, start leading, and there's a lot of ground that you can cover.
That you just touched on, I think, a really interesting point, that perception of an organization that does have a commercial leader and how that has the potential of attracting talent in a certain way. I think that's a really interesting topic because it's not just perception. Obviously, it is showing that the organization is committed to that piece. But I think it really does speak to the importance for organizations to go down that route, because those who are maybe more seasoned, more kind of progressive in our industry know that that's such an important piece. They are looking for that. They're looking for that kind of guarantee that commercial is the overall mindset of the org. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Very cool. All right. So I think we can go ahead and start wrapping things up. Jenna, I really appreciate you spending time today. This is great. I love diving into your brain and getting to learn more about this. Anybody who is on the line right now, we will send over the recording to you later. Any last thoughts, Jenna?
No, just thank you everyone for your time, and just keep reading too, right? Like whenever you see commercial strategy or sales, marketing, revenue, hopefully in your inbox. If not, sign up, for some of the newsletters and immerse yourself. There's just so much you can learn.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, guys, thank you again, and we'll see you next month.